Now, we're going to analyze Yola as far as looking through her life and then her Bardo stage, her death. And what Ra says about this is that you can't really look at somebody's Bardo and not actually analyze their chart, their life, because you need to know who they are, right? You need to be able to understand what they be. So you can't look at somebody's Bardo and not know them. It's important to understand them as a being. So this is a split definition, emotional projector. You can see that she's a right angle cross of explanation. There's something remarkable about how our place in space that we die, as far as the time, death is a place, remember, death is a place because we're all spiraling through space and time. And as we look at what the evolutionary journey is of a human being, evolutionary, good word for this lady, her body was a 6 line. So remember what happens with the 6, the body breaking down at 50 if one is not living truly in alignment. 6 line mind at 50, mind breaking down if one is not living in alignment. So the way that we leave this plane according to Ra is rather remarkable. So first we're going to take a bit of a look at this being and analyze what we see according to what she is, what she be. There's something about this person that I can relate to, don't know about you, but I'm an emotional split as well. We see that this particular split is the mental and the emotional split off from each other. Yeah, the mental construct of the definition, very strongly defined mind, very busy, very loud, very active relative to channel definition mind. If we can see, forget about openness for a moment, let's just look at this projector and know that this is 70% of her movie, her show, right? Because we have the sun grounded into the earth. Actually, it's a little bit more because the body and its exhalation, that's what Saturn is on the body side, responsible for calcification, aging, and the bones, Saturn. So we see an exact conjunction of the 23-4, both planets, Sun and Saturn, unconscious Saturn. So what do we have here if we think about the compression or the repression of somebody's conscious light? We have a cross of explanation, very fixed mind. We know the 4th line is very one-tracked, the one-tracked mind right here. So we have only 3 variations that are like this, creating strong definition in the entire mandala wheel. We know that it's channel of structuring, design of individuality here. She's also got one of the other channels, almost all 3 of the other channels that create definition through opposition of Sun, Earth, or nodes. And then she's got an aspect of the 3420, which is the other of the 3. So you've got a very, very strong definition, a strongly defined mind, a fixed mind. Yeah, fixed, not flexible, incredibly, let's say, punishing mind, potentially. Yeah, as far as their process. 4323 is about saying, I know or I don't know. They're either going to insist that they know or they're going to desist. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Ra was a knower too. His 4323 was unconscious, environmental, 3rd line. So he would make mistakes with his mind. This one, rigid, not flexible, very fixed. He would say, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know. You hear it from me too. I've got this 23. I know, I don't know. You know, it's the curse, Ra would say, of this particular channel that we either know or we don't know. Remember the pulse. This is a 60. So it's individual frequency, the on-off pulse of knowing or not. Part of the knowing circuitry structuring is. So, of course, We think of this as ourselves when it's the sun, earth on the conscious personality side. You think of it as I, but it's not the full story. We know that. Thank heavens that there is the body, which is the life that we know, that we can see it for what it is. So knowing that it's individual here means that, and that it's fourth line, means that we know that there is an incredible resistance to anybody trying to break down, because remember what the 23 does, it breaks down things into little tiny digestible parts and pieces. And this person can claim that they know and have a very strong, definitive, I know, this is exhale. So when they forcefully exhale, we hear the knowing or not. So maybe this knowing is considered to be freakish. We know that this is genius to freak as far as a keynote is concerned. What if it is incredibly rigid and structured? I know. But other people don't really want to hear what you know if you don't wait for that opening, that energetic opening and that clarity in order to sharing, lots, or supporting or empowering with whatever it is that you are being. So Ra called it, this can be really out to lunch. Just because they say they know doesn't necessarily make it so to the entirety of the collective homogenized world, as in they can't know what you know, They can't. Not everybody. The thing that is about inner truth, remember, it's individual. So knowing is individual. It's just a keynote. Knowing is individual. You can only know or not. And it's not always there. Even if once upon a time you knew, I knew it, it doesn't always stick around. The pulse is off and on, there and gone. So even though you might raise your little hand and say, I know, and the teacher picks on you and you go, nobody else knows what you know because only you knew it, Sorry. Having fun with that one. So we can explain the insight here with this one, but only to who? Strangers? No. Friends. This is a fourth line theme. This being was here for friends, familiars, those that they know, the externalization process of one's influence of what you know. So the only thing that makes this 4323 viable is its ability to explain. One of the reasons why Ra would always advise those who have this channel to learn how to explain yourself succinctly, individually. If you can explain your insight, and this is what's grounding insight, individual insight, grounding for this being, because that's the earth. If you can explain that insight, then you can move this mutative inner thought process out into the world of form. Where the world of form is, where manifestation, metamorphosis is communication and taking action. This is a primary communication gate. It's a metamorphic gate because the 23 is pointed up at the ajna. They are metamorphic gates, 62, 23, 56. So when you take that mutative thought out of the isolated realm of your internal mind and put it out into the world of form, to be able to explain it to the collective is tricky business. How do you do that if they're not available to focus on you, to process what you're saying, to tune into your weird individual genius freaky knowing? They have to be on your wavelength, the wavelength. And in the ability, that's brainwave, wavelength right there. The ability to share the knowing that is there. Tricky business, because knowing isn't necessarily something that you can explain. Now we've got somebody who is not only a conscious knower, but also she has the formula on the unconscious. So if we think about what it is to be a cross of explanation, This is what we're looking at. 2 parts individual, 1 part collective, and 1 part tribal. We're looking at this person having the whole channel of logic, this ability to ground the formula or answers into a way that is able to be shared about the future. What are the patterns? What are the questions that we are doubtful on? And sharing an answer that can logically make sense, potentially, logically, be projected, it's a projected channel, out into the future. And what is it going to go towards? It's going to go towards adding on that 17, but it's going to energize, wrong word, it's going to express out into the world here through the throat. So they don't know how they know the answer if we're looking at this. We don't know. How do they know the answer? They don't know because they're consciously defined. It's part of their cross that their unconscious definition has the formula, and it's a part of their connection to their life, this path that they're walking, their environmental road in this life. We have a fully resonant channel of structuring, 4th line, and a fully harmonic logic channel. So part of the incarnation cross being very, very interesting, as in the whole mental field of this being was very strong, big part of her life process and purpose to be able to get to that awareness and share it and explain it. So we know we have somebody who has the answer, but they don't know why or how they know what they know, and that they have an answer is something that can be somewhat of a problem. This is a being who is designed to talk. This is not a sit down and shut up, speak unless I speak to you kind of being. But who do you tell when you're a projector with a not wide split, with a split, an emotional authority at that? Who do you tell? You tell your friends. Those people that know, like, and trust you. Those people who like you for you and your weird, freaky genius explanations that are very fixed, very close-minded, this one. Yeah, very rigid and inflexible mind. So this is something else when we see about this throat. Look at how many activations are there in this throat. That's just the throat now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. This is somebody who could really spout off a lot of stuff, according to Ra. A throat that is in an absolute atomic bomb, quote unquote. He would call this channel, the 4323, a verbal gunslinger. Gunslinger meaning shoot your mouth off and to hell with the consequences. The problem with that, as this being is a split and emotional, is that they have to be clear in order for that knowing to come across successfully. Let's say that because that's in alignment with her type. She's a projector. So what we're looking at, the rigid and inflexible, is because the 4th line and the definition. Rigid and inflexible, close-minded, as in there is closed circuitry. If we think about the body graph like a circuit board, anytime you have an activation on one side of a channel meeting up in the same channel with another activation on the other side, that is a closed circuit. So we have a closed mind. In fact, we have 3 different aspects of circuitry closed. So she knows she has the answer, but she doesn't know how she has the answer. I have, the tribal people say this, I have an answer. But who are you going to tell? Who's going to listen to you spout off your knowing? Who's going to allow for you to speak and share what you know that may be sometimes dismissed as a freak? So many different activations. We won't go into all of them, but at least you see the most important things is that this is a being who is here to talk communication. No direct connection to action, but we have hanging gates pointed at motors, right? We have the 20 pointed at the 34. That would have been action. We have the 12 pointed at the 22 and the 35 pointed at the 36. That would have been action because sacral and emotional, they're both motors. Now, we're looking at somebody who is looking for their tribe because we have the channel of community, a design of a part seeking a whole. And they're looking for their people, mine, ours, love, honor, and obey, stream here. So they know they have the answer, but they don't know how to get their tribe to listen to me. I have the answer. So I'm going to just try and talk, tell everybody what I know. And you don't know what I know. How the hell could you know? I know it, if they can get quite arrogant. They don't know who to tell because you don't have your tribe, because you're lost and confused. Remember what the openness can lead to. Looking, trying to find who you are and where you belong. We can see that there's behavior being pointed at, not just power or intuition. To be able to find your tribe is about frequency, nothing more, nothing less. It's not about seeking, searching. It is about finding yourself in your guidance advice for the projector. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3 different activations that could potentially make this being motorized to the throat. Yeah, and then we'd have a motor mouth. So this is a conditioned motor mouth. Conditioned because the mind is not motorized. It's a conditioned motor mouth. And so what happens? As far as the dynamic of the deepest conditioning, beyond food, beyond whoever raised you, it's sex. You take in that being, this was a female, you take in that other being into your being. Let's say it's a traditional man-woman sex, and that man leaves his seed in you, his saliva in you, and now you've got chimeric DNA growing inside of you. I know, my mind is calling it disgusting, but my sex drive is gone for some years now. So the natural way of bonding for a being who is a basic split is pair bonding. Okay, pair bonding. So if they were traditionally oriented towards the male, they would have had sex and lots of it. We can see that we have the drive for sex, 41, to the feel, to the sex act, 36, crisis, and actual intimacy, 6, the opposition on the other side, to making progress or change. So there's 2 ways in which we have a direct connection from the emotional system up to the throat. And that is why sex, gate of fucking, 36, is one of the primary ways that this person would have been attracted to bonding in order to find one's community, or let's say create or build community. You can see that we have hooks into the intimacy realms where we could mate and be reproductive, as well as take care of or raise a family. So just one of the ways, natural way, easiest, fastest way, fuck, says the genetic imperative, to bond with what is different. And then you can see that another way that the split definition could be bridged is the 22, which is, this is a being who's here to talk. I know I can try, says the 12. And what is the 22 about? It's about hearing, or let's say listening, being open to, socially open to communicating. This is the 22, grace, social openness or not. It's about being able to hear what people really want over time. That's the left ear, after all, to hear what people truly are passionate about. So another way that she can get easily connected is she's looking for somebody to listen to her talk. Okay, this would be turning this split definition projector into an emotional manifester. So conditioned to be emotionally manifested as far as experientially or sexually, as well as individually or communicatively, powerfully, conditioned to try to manifest. So what does a projector try to do in order to manifest? A projector who is designed to talk in order to manifest, well, they just talk more and they just talk louder. And that is one of the reasons why a defined throat, if they're not operating in alignment, this is a non-motorized throat, is going to talk too much and do too much, give their energy away to every impetus. Why? Because of the split being the conditioning, the primary crystallized conditioning, thinking that one must go through this experience, make it happen, force it, push it, will it, potentially, not using the willpower correctly. So anytime you look at somebody's profile, if you see a 6 line in their profile, you know there's always going to be sex in the equation. Why? First 30 years of one's life, you operate like a 3. So you bond with the wrong people, unfortunately. For those of you who have 6 line body children, 4, 6, or 3, 6, unfortunately, you can't protect them from that. It is something that is a part of process of life. Third lines are promiscuous. Hi, my mind was incredibly promiscuous before deconditioning and aligning. It just is what it is. The third line body, of course, is going to be more promiscuous. Of course, there's different things that can trip us up. Okay, there's always different things, but just generally speaking, we're looking at somebody that hoping the intimacy, the bond in sexuality would be able to help them manifest, let's say, their dreams of what experiences could be. So I know the answer. The answer is, if I go here and bond or mate with this being, then I'll be able to be a part of something, a tribe, a family. If you love me, well, then you'd let me talk. And potentially, we'd have sex and mate and bond and have more in this life. Who can I tell, as in talk to? Who can I lead? This is a being whose life was lost to the conditioning of thinking that they had to find themselves through a lover, through an other. We know that this undefined G center is always looking for love and direction. This is a very intelligent projector, but very fixed. Okay. Most projectors can see big picture view, unless they're being totally conditioned to try to figure out themselves, pointing inward instead of focusing outward. That's what a projector is here for, to focus on the other. That's what your brilliant minds are here for, to be able to guide and advise the other. So the tiniest little bits of information, Ross says that she was very smart and was trying to figure everything out, that she was actually an amazing being, but that she was a lost soul. After she met Design for the first time, she came up to him and said, or actually it was a look. It was a look that, oh my God, this is it. And if you've ever met a projector who fell in love with human design at whatever site, first, middle, or last, you know that look. It's the same look of, oh my God, this is amazing, isn't it? So open G, always looking for love based on a condition. Okay, the condition is that this being is going to want to share her answers, explain things to you, and you've got to accept her. Otherwise, you don't know her, love her, appreciate, value her for what she brings to the table. So your life's work, the I am principle, is your incarnation cross. Whatever it is, whatever it happens to be. So Ra says, quote, no matter what you could do for this being, no matter what you could offer her, the only thing you could truly offer her is one of the things that gave her the deepest satisfaction in this life and the deepest conditioner, and that's the 22nd gate. Someone who will listen to her so she can tell them all these things that she knows in so many ways. Very clever. Very clever. Okay, let's take a look at this fourth line of fragmentation. We have the extreme ends of the spectrum. Anytime you have this as an incarnation cross, because sun and earth are the exact polar opposites, right? And if it's in the incarnation cross, we know that the sun and earth are going to be there in that channel, pulling these to the extremes. The fourth line reads fragmentation. This is a being who learned about diversification without a perceived potential for synthesis. That's her life process of learning. The bold blue, we call it an umbrella line, above the sun and earth. This is not something you are born with when it's bold or blue. It is something that is discovered, learned, experienced, expressed, known over the life. So she's wandering around with this deep intellectual capacity, looking for someone to share or be open with socially in order to hear what she has to say. We know the individual mind is acoustic. Lots of individuality here and a format energy, the 60, that creates even more of this on off pulse of knowing, often on, there, and gone, provoking or empowering or whatever the case may be, trying, often on. So we see this fourth line of fragmentation. The sun exalts, it reads fatalism, individual expression which has no collective value. Imagine being born with no collective value. It sounds really terrible, doesn't it? No collective value. A being like me who's collective goes, I want to be of value to the collective, you know? But this is fatalism and egoism, and damn the consequences. So when you think about this fragmentation and a diversification without perceived potential for synthesis, you have somebody whose knowing is only designed to be there for her friends. Fourth line. Okay. Both sides up and down the ladder. On the other side, we've got atheism and paranoia. Interesting that paranoia is being shared in a fourth line process. Note the keynote. Paranoia we normally reserve for the fifth line. But this one says atheism and paranoia, individual expression, which engenders isolation and fear. Here, her core light of awareness engendering isolation and fear with her individual expression. This is her theme. This is her life's work of explanation. So she's got all of this. I know, I have the answer, her incarnation cross, and nobody wants to listen to her unless they're her friends. That's again one of the reasons why we inform people, anyone who has a fourth line in their sun earth on either side, conscious or unconscious, everything comes to you through your network, through your influential network of friends. So strengthen your network of friends. Otherwise, nobody's going to want to listen to you. Strangers aren't going to want to listen to this person. This is a very fixed mind. So there is a natural, let's say, warmth and availability, maybe sometimes over availability to want to have friends and bond. But her friendships may not last very long. First 30 years of her life, she was a 6 line, so she operated like a 3. So she had friends in her life that wouldn't necessarily stay friends, you see, unfortunately, because you bond with the wrong people the first 30 years of your life if you are a 6 line body. So the only beings that will notice what's really there according to what's true, real, honest, and authentic to this being is going to be a long-term friend. A long-term friend. It's not easy to see this being because we have this very fixed mind, a mind that will open its mouth and insert foot, unfortunately. You have to be aware to know what is there. We have the one-track mind. 43.4, one-track mind. Do recall that you can use any of these lines across the board in all 64 gates because of the theme of genetic continuity. Fourth lines are fixed. So this woman says, oh, I know. I have to tell you. I have to tell you. Genoa said that this being drove him crazy. And so Genoa, the Human Design America College dean, knew this woman in person too. So she was looking for her tribe. Ross says that she found it in the end. She rolled in on her hospital bed with her IV in her arm to come to one of his lectures. And he said that there she was with her tribe. But think about what a life this was. Not knowing how to be correct, or not knowing, she didn't get human design at the beginning of her life process, unfortunately. But of course, it is what it is. We have the Genius to Freak channel. Some people call it Freak to Geek to make it a little bit nicer. But look at this not self, the totally open splenic center. Totally open. What do we know about totally open? Absolute PhD life. No activation that she's working on in this life. None. So the thing that she's holding on to, things that are unhealthy for her, unfortunately, the people, the places, the things, the work, the stressors, whatever oppression or vulnerability she had from the first 30 years of her life bonding with the wrong people. So the abandonment issues, as an example. Undefined splenic center, you got abandonment issues. Yeah, because as a child, being clinging, looking for safety, security, well-being in and other. So that is a repeating pattern that we've got going on here. Basic split, repeating pattern, because it's looking for the other. Where's my other half? My other part, my other part of my missing piece, my wholeness. And then the relational dynamic of all these gates being in the quarter of duality, purpose fulfilled through bonding at the very last part of the quarter. So we're looking at somebody who had abandonment issues. What it is to be a freak that nobody wants to be around because nobody understands you, and so they dismiss you. How painful that can be. Wouldn't that make her mean? Kindness, 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 and then mean if they dismiss her as a freak. Of course, it's a defense mechanism. So you can see in her purpose that it was about the diversification. She finally got to her own individual truth. She explored all kinds of nooks and crannies of the esoteric, this or that, you name it. This deep diversification, waiting for something, not knowing, but waiting for something to gel. Yeah, for that communion to happen with her tribe who would finally get her, understand her, know her for who she was looking. We know that the 4037 is about finding. Yeah. Seeking 1156, the equivalent, is not about finding, but 4037 is about finding. Now, this is a non-sacral being, somebody who doesn't necessarily know how to maintain their work value on the material plane as far as, overdoing it. Fourth line, exhaustion, people fatigue, overdoing it because didn't know when to quit. Overdid it. And we also see that this is somebody who was incredibly dependent on others in order to hook into or to bridge that split. Basic split or quad split. They're looking for specific others. This does not apply to the triple split. Triple split needs, not looking for wholeness, needs synthesis of large amounts of information. But a basic split always wants to go and find that other that makes a difference in their lives, that wholeness. So this projector wants to lead with her intelligent mind. Nobody wants her in the tribe, though, because they don't understand her. They don't get her. And this is who she was. To have the pain that this bargain wasn't ever being given to her to create. Because remember, the channel of the bargain, channel of community, design of a part seeking the whole. They're here to create the bargain. They're in charge of governing or creating or setting the terms of the bargain. This is a defined ego. So the willful determination tempered with the emotional volatility of the wave in order to create fair and balanced bargains, or not. So, what she lived as far as the not self was concerned was a lousy deal in this life because she wasn't given her power to create fair and balanced bargains because of seeking to find love outside of herself, holding on to unhealthy people, overdoing it, and doing it in a very quick and stressed out way, fast, rather than taking her time. She is emotional. She is here to recognize and be recognized in return, to be invited into those big things in life. But you have a false super slave or a false manifester who can talk and be so keen and conniving. You have somebody who talks her way into trouble. So an unequally painful life, not easy, as in full of pain and drama and trauma and struggling of poverty and all kinds of things that were, oh, my mind says a sight to see, even though I didn't see her. But I can imagine what she might have looked like being wheeled in on her hospital bed with an IV in her arm to be with her tribe. So Ross says, quote, "It isn't to say that there were not things about her where you could, in essence, see the potential of what was there. It wasn't all lost. I saw it right away. I saw it in her eyes. I saw that she got it. It was obvious. But what it meant for a being like this who was in awareness, who could have had such an extraordinary experience with what you go through, discovering the essence through living out this experiment, she didn't get that. The only part of the experience she lived out truly was her death. I guess it's kind of perfect, but this is where she really lived out her design. She went through the door correctly. So I want you to have a sense of the being. For some of us, she's to understand what life can be and what it is to fulfill this purpose, this opportunistic role model, waiting for the opportunity to live out the perfection of being your example. That was her purpose. Unquote. From Ra. So this is the dying sequence. We've looked at this dying sequence, the 5 stages of dying. In this last stage, the moon in the 14.6, remember, once that clicks in, from that moment on, death is inevitable. In other words, there's no return. The death is going to happen. So he put the information in the course so that you could run her death chart if you want to. What's fascinating to me is that it's an interesting dynamic, in fact, that I get a lot of cross of Mayas in my practice. I don't know about you guys, but there are a ton of Mayas in human design. Of course, this being the mechanics of a Maya, I imagine they're very drawn to having some kind of tool like human design to be able to navigate this Maya. So you can see that this is the moment the death was announced and the clock ran out on her life. Time ran out. And so to the analysis of when the moon was in the final lock, if we look at the 14.6, that's what really keys in the death process. But this is still at a moment when she is alive as far as the end of the dying stages, because she didn't die at 14.6. Okay, the death was inevitable at that juncture, though. So we're going to sit and wait for the moon to exactly align to the right place, which is going to be over here at 46.5. And that's going to be important in our analysis. And what's interesting about 46.5, apart from the concept of embodiment and success, it's about being in the right place at the right time. It's a gate of serendipity, good fortune, good luck. And the 46.5 is the line of pacing. It reads the maintenance of proper rhythm that in its instinctive practicality avoids radical divergence from successful patterns. In other words, this is the determination to stay with the rhythm that brings success. Yola knew that she was leaving, that she was dying, and she wanted the most efficient way to go. No surprise. That channel, 4323, is about efficiency. So she wanted to do something right in the end, as far as it's interesting to think about that pacing, to go through the process of successfully decarnating. The 46 is the body, it's the love of the body. Isn't that fascinating? So, the key as we look through this Bardo process, the nature of where Bardo begins, the earth in line two, or sorry, gate two. Gate two. Okay. So the possibilities of the kind of interpretation, Ra was very fascinated, enthralled with details. You know that he had that. Yeah. Gate four, line one, going into detail, detail, detail. He had 11 first lines. So in terms of analysis, as far as to be clear about the gate that you leave on, the earth gate that you leave on is also going to be a major theme, not just the line quality. So we get to see this in a kind of impersonal context because it's not connected to our physical form as far as when we die. But in terms of what we have, according to our connection to everything, we are beings of earth. We are born, live, and die on this earth. So, according to the movement, remember, we're all movement, traveling, hurtling through space and time, movement along fractal lines, the directions and comings and goings of things, all the things of us aligning to what's true, honest, and real for us is about being embodied on this plane in this form, which is a form of Mama Earth. Yeah. So we're dealing with a Sphinx gate. Yeah. The handle of the trident, so to speak, because the Sphinx gates look like Shiva's trident, Neptune's trident, whatever you want to call it, the two, and then the 7, 1, and 13. So we're allowing for this gate of the driver to be the earth gate now, as far as where the earth was. So a Sphinx death, Ra would call it, as in it's correct for this information to go out into the world on a Sphinx. Why? Because the Sphinx provides direction. This is the form, right? The beginning of the quarter of civilization, purpose fulfilled through form, the yinnest of all gates, all yin lines, line two, or gate two. So, this is something to be clear about according to the nature of analyzing death. We look at the earth and we look at the moon of the moment of death to see what is to be accordingly for their Bardo. So here's that death chart now. In the death chart, we can see where the earth is in gate 2, line 3. So she got the chaos death as far as the first stage of the Bardo. And then we read the line. The third line reads patience, the teacher that never stops being a student. The line itself being the line of patience, being such a beautiful line. Okay, teacher that never stops being the student. All of us who are threes, we know this line because we resonate to this. Jupiter exalts. It reads, dedication to a lifetime of receptivity. So focusing on dedication, as in on this left angle cross of dedication being a dedication to a lifetime of receptivity. Receptivity. And on the body side, when we look at the Mars, we have the fifth line of intelligent application. So Ross says what's so interesting about that is, quote, when you think about this person, and it's not about going back here to their individual design, but if you go back to their individual design and the two that they have, they carry the 2.5, which is intelligent application, it's something to see clearly about seeing this death or Bardo process in a larger context. So the Earth was conjunct on her own natal Mars, intelligent application, an intelligent being. So when you're looking at the 2.3 in this sense, as far as her death process, entering into chaos, we know that's the line of the 3. We have the dedication to a lifetime of receptivity with the maturity to accept that the process never ends until death, actually. So we see that in this line process, the reward is for services rendered, rewards for services rendered when it's connected to gate 14, the receptivity being a lifelong process. So learning right up until her deathbed, dragging herself into the conference or seminar on her deathbed, literally. So Ross says, it's interesting that everything about this death is a reward for a lifetime of receptivity, regardless of whether or not that receptivity ever even functioned properly. After all, this is a being who lived the not self and lived the not self until nearly the very end of her life. Yet, at the same time, the receptivity to the direction of the right direction is something that the 2.3 carries with it. An incredible connection that it has with the gate 14, where it speaks specifically about what happens. The triggering of the gate 14, remember 14, the moon in 14 triggered the death sequence. And that completes itself in the gate 2.3 for the earth. And so it's all about her life receiving rewards for a lifelong process of learning. Now, Ross says it may be that he's doing a subjective interpretation, and he guesses that's always a possibility, but he knew her personally. So we are on the outside of, looking inward, and we can never really know. But it was clear to him that this here is someone, this is the death chart, but that Yola was someone who, in her death process, in the end, was given the reward of correct direction, a reward of the real lifetime process. Remember, no personality is punished in death. So this is going to be the beginning of her chaos process, going through 3 and into 4 and into 5. Her movement through that, in that. As far as the Earth in gate 2, line 3, 33%, about a third of the way through the line. So for her first step, she's going to get about 2/3 of the potential of that particular sequence. So it's one of the things to understand about the 72-hour thing, being that this is where the return can take place at any time within that 72-hour. As far as the maximum of 72 hours, it's quite rare because, look, we have the trinary process, and 72-hour would be beyond. So Ra said it would be he said rare. But how would we know? He just said rare. So it wouldn't be that they'd get a 4th line. It's not going to be common that people are dying at the very beginning of any line. They can happen, but it's not a common thing. It's more uncommon, right? To be born right on the cusp of these things. Or, sorry, die right on the cusp of these things. So as far as the way the time frames operate, remember there's always going to be a trinary process, a tripartite Bardo process, where some people do not get the full first stage. They might only get a third or 2/3, as in this case. We got 2/3. So the vast majority of human beings, in other words, they're just going to get a small portion or a large portion, but not the full portion as far as what is going to take place in their Bardo process or stage. So this is a very simple analysis that we're going to look at. How we mark it is through the earth again. Earth is our marco that gives us the Bardo sequence. So there's the earth. We look at the line, and there's the third line. And it's not just like that's the only element that could line up to look at it, remember? We could look at where the line itself is, where it's being activated. And that's one of the most important things that we can do. That is our process to remember. The planets, too, that are in exaltation and that are in detriment. So for her, in her case, the beings who held the door open, beings, I'm anthropomorphizing planets, but these are the ones that are on the door. Remember, I was speaking about the door at the beginning? Things that hold the door open, the guardians of the death. So if we go to the second gate and the third line, what we have here is the line of patience, Jupiter exalted, Uranus in detriment. So we're dealing with Jupiter and we're dealing with Uranus. They become the ones that open the door of death, the guardians of the door, her door for death. So we imagine reaching the point of death as a possibility for a whole number of different doorways, that little activation, if you will, of memory. Remember, we have all done this before. We all walk through doors all the time, but death being just a doorway, as in this form, it's finite. And all of us being reincarnative multiple times in whatever form, body. Remember, 64,000 different forms each personality crystal may have encountered. Not all of them human. Please understand that. On this planet, anyway. Okay? So, the number of different doorways, doors that lead to very different things. If we imagine all of these doorways, like, you know how when you go into the back end of a movie theater and they have those stars on the door and they have the name of the star, okay? The name or the label of the door. That label is your eulogy, the door that describes your life. You can only go through the door because it's your door and no one else's. The door that is only opened by the forces, that label on the door that you can read once you know somebody's death moment. So you grab the door openers, holding the doors open, the guardians, Jupiter and Uranus. So Jupiter exalts, Uranus detriments. It's not particularly interesting as far as the line itself, according to Ra. The line has to do with the sequence, yes, as far as, okay, it brought the sequence as far as chaos, right? But what are the planets? That's more important now, whether they really are exalted or in detriment. So we're going to go look at Jupiter and at Uranus. So we go to those planets at the moment of death. It's the same chart. See the 2.3 right there, same chart. And then we're going to go to Jupiter, and we see Jupiter was the exaltation, remember? And that Uranus was the detriment. And so those relate to what they were in the 2.3. But now we have a position for Jupiter and we have a position for Uranus as far as those guardians that held the door open. So if we go to the Jupiter activation, we see the 38.5. That is the line of alienation. The bold blue reads a stage in opposition where one is totally isolated. You look only at the exaltation because that is what the earth said to do. Earth said, go look at the teacher, Jupiter, right? The rule. So we see Jupiter exalted. Okay, at the moment of death, we go look at this Jupiter in the death chart, and the detriment has no value. We don't look at the detriment. We just look at what is exalted, and we see Saturn exalts. The ambition and concentration to endure. The energy to stubbornly fight alone. Now for Uranus, we're looking only at the detriment. This fifth line of leadership in gate 60, Uranus. Jupiter, detriments, where the natural desire for expansion, when limitations are essential, creates confusion from the top. In other words, this is expansive energy that cannot handle limitations. So that was the other side of the binary of the gate 2. Line 3, Uranus detriment. So we go look at Uranus and reread the detriment. Okay, the detriment is the only thing that is of value for our analysis work. So now we read the combination of these to get what's on the door. Okay, the label on the door is alienation, leadership. In other words, the alienated leader. The alienated leader. That's her door. Everybody, you, me, all of us, when we leave, we're going to have a guardian that opens the door, guardians that open the door for us, as in it's pronouncing on our lives, as in our general holistic process of this life and what it has been. So this is the thing that we can go and look at, whether we achieve our purpose through it or not. There are many other things to consider, according to Ra, besides the line qualities, as we have seen for the Bardo process. So if we look at back at her design, remember, she had a 60, didn't she? She also had a 39, not 38, but just something to see that her life was probably, in the first 30 years especially, very chaotic. Third line, the sixth line truly being archetypal nature, this alienated leader. Life can be beautiful, it can be horrendous, it can be tragic, it can be messy, it can be anything and everything in between. It's not a value judgment that one being's life is more valuable than any other. It's not. It's simply a matter of alignment, correctness, which is what we are attempting to experiment with, getting to the place of when we use our decision-making process, our authoritative principle, rather than our mind telling us what to do. So by operating correctly, as in authentically, it doesn't matter what the theme of the life has been. Truly, what were we here for? What did we do besides our life process, life's work? But the death process showed to what we could not see when she was alive. We could only see when she was gone, what she was here for as far as the death knowledge given to Ra and now to us. Thank you, Ra. It doesn't really have much value to her. She lived it. We get to analyze it, as in we get to see what her life was like in death, because the door openers, they really describe you, this alienated leader that we have here. Now let's see her line qualities. So we're leaving the guardians behind because they've held the door open, and now we're going into the Bardo stages. So we have a Bardo that's going to be 3, 2/3 of the way through 3, 4, and 5, and then leaving at any point during 5. Okay. Ra wants you to be very careful about being prejudiced towards anything being good, bad, right, wrong, this or that. We know human design, linguistically, there is no morality. That we're using very specific language with singular values when we're analyzing things. And that's why it's so important that we're using the right words, and that none of this is good, bad, right, wrong as far as our analysis. The word chaos can be taken to be negative. But why? Why is chaos negative? Disorder or chaos. There has to be this in order to have that, right? So we're seeing, according to her nature of going through her chaotic death process. Yes, life might have been chaotic, especially first 30 years. But this is a fabulous ability to see everything stripped away from order, because the chaos never really is seen clearly in life. But in death, we might be able to see somewhat of true chaos, potentially. There's no such thing as true chaos. There's only a glamour, according to Ra. Not modern idea of like glitz and glamour of Hollywood, but the older use of that word, as in the sheen that covers things. So you never really get to see how ugly it could be underneath. There is this illusion that everything is organized and then everything is okay. But under here, we see the chaos. Yeah. We think that everything's under control in the Maya, but the Maya can be quite chaotic. But truly pulling away the curtain, getting beyond the Maya and seeing the chaos, the stripped down experience or breakdown experience of what's underneath all of the patina of humanity or the forms, you know, it's not necessarily a negative here. It can be revelationary or revelatory, a true revelation. There we go. So we see the trial for the first part, 2/3 of the 72 hours, patience, for the 2/3 of 24 hours in order to get to the full Bardo. So for Ra, somebody who got the third as a starter, it's very different, of course, than having it at the middle or the end. But the third of a starter, as far as getting into Bardo, this is for people who have been so deeply caught up in identifying with the Maya, drowning in the illusion, and then now we get caught up in seeing through the lie. I like to call it of the ego eye, as in recognizing or imagining your personality getting freed from the ordeal of being human. Because you're not really human. Your personality crystal can be anything. Anything. You're just identified with being human in this life, in this body, in this form. Because currently it seems to be that we are human. Yes, this vehicle. But the way in which we take in information, as in through the brain system when we were alive, is not the same as it is when we are in death. Because the electromagnetism is not all there, not in the same way, right? So Ross says it can be showing up like a million veils drop in half a second. How many veils can you fit through the eye of a needle in half a second? Whoosh. One after the other, like the endless cosmic repetitive orgasm. Don't get prejudiced. Chaos can be extraordinary. And certainly there's nothing about Bardo that has anything to do with karma, he says. Karma is what belongs to the body. Karma simply means past life action. Okay? Life action brought into this life. That was the vehicle. That was the body. Let's not confuse life with death. Okay? The body is the life. And in the geometry and trajectory of our ability to float around above a body, in death, we get something else. Okay? We get the personality crystal disengaged from the form, no longer human. The alienated leader, particularly. Okay? What to do when they get into their Bardo as far as they exit the doorway. So this is the alienated leader doorway for her. And so the sequence of chaos as a starter, all those veils being stripped away as they enter into the trial of Bardo, the third line being patience. The power to endure with patience, according to the first part of that chaotic window of Bardo that this being went through. So he wants us to look back at the guardians for a moment, Jupiter, particularly in alienation. And then that's the 38. So part of the channel of struggle, right? Stubbornness is the design principle. But here, the learning was a stage in opposition when one is deeply isolated, totally isolated, sorry, totally isolated. So Jupiter opened the door for Yole and gave her the exaltation of the ambition and concentration to endure. We can hear the workhorse ethic of the Saturn, the energy to stubbornly fight alone. So when that door opened up, all those things that she thought she knew that she didn't know, now she's going to see. Okay? As in the alienation business of being a fighter. And this beautiful line of the teacher never stops being a student, as in the umbrella line patience here. We're looking at, for somebody who is going to be the first person to die accordingly and specifically to the Rave Book of the Dead, here is somebody who dies with the earth in the second gate and the line of the driver, or the gate of the driver, the line of patience, where we have the magnetic monopole, yeah, hooking up with the design. It's no longer there because it's gone. But we know that the gate 2 is in Taurus, as we saw, the yinnest of all hexagrams. Ra calls it painstakingly perfect, this teacher that never stops being a student, even learning in death. Learning through alienation, a stage in opposition when one is totally isolated to fight alone. So in his deconstruction, he said, quote, there is this clarity here that here is where the reward really is. No recognition in the life. Excuse me, here comes the alienated leader struggling alone and all that stuff. It's all there. Here, look, see? Chaos simply means that there is no rhyme, no reason, no order. So we see the higher knowing for the Uranus, higher knowing. And Uranus giving us leader, gate 60, line 5, the sequence of chaos enforcing smallness of what we are, as in it can be overwhelming to strip through the veils of the Maya, remember? Overwhelming and very profound, because here we're looking at higher knowing. See, Uranus, higher knowing, the higher knowing of leadership. So every one of these aspects being about higher knowing for this being. This particular place where higher knowing is just about everything. Everywhere you look, every theme for every line. Higher knowing. Higher knowing. And in continuing the sequence, we're looking through from chaos into the passage. A line that is about the transition, okay? All of this is transition, but particularly here, we see we're all patterns within patterns, looking at patterns, right? Here's the pattern, 1, 2, and 3, actually 3, 4, and 5, and the middle is the transition, okay? Passage. Moving from chaos to passage is quite a transition, and all of them are. But Ra didn't know whether there was going to be like a fade in or fade out kind of thing, or just a jump cut from one to another. He wasn't told how this really functions. But he does know that the point where we enter into, as far as where we're going into in this middle sequence, from what he understood and the way it was explained to him, is that the middle sequence is the deepest. And of course, that would make sense, as in we're going to get the longest time frame in it, because we die at some point and we leave at some point, but the only point line that we get the wholeness of is that middle line, right? Because of the time. So it's very significant, to put it that way, as far as an important aspect of the Bardo process. It's the middle passage, to be cute, passage. Okay, so for her, the fourth line. You went through the first shock of transition from life to death, and hers was into chaos, into the state of Bardo. And then we go into the middle. The third sequence is really more about a preparation for you to get picked up. This fourth sequence, we get the fullness of, in her passage, opportunity for secretiveness. So here we have the fourth line of gate 2, line 4, it's secretiveness. And this gate here is all about secrets and the line quality 4, which is quite interesting since secrets, we wouldn't think of a fourth line keeping secrets, but technically we think, oh, externalization, externalization, externalization. But remember the 26.4? What does the 26.4 say? It says censorship. Ah, now we get the 2.4, secretiveness. So fourth lines are censoring and they are secretive. So here we see keeping secrets, the ability to be discreet. Okay, how to keep secrets. Or it can also be the inability to be discreet. So passage for this process, it can sound really simple going from one thing to another, but an experiential value of going through here. Learn more than modesty, the ability to preserve harmony. And how we're going to do that is through discretion. So it doesn't mean that the being can reveal this, but this is somebody who's going through a passage, as in this theme of perfection of her direction in her death. And the theme of higher knowing is that in the essence of her Bardo, there was an opportunity for secrets, as in the passage out of the Maya going to be filled with the recognition of what the isness or her itness of being was. It's about secrets here. All the things that we don't know while we wait for some kind of specific key to happen, as in the limitation of our perception. Oh, our perception is everything, isn't it? Change your perception and the things that you look at seem to change. So how we are perceiving death has to do with the brain pan that we have, just like life, right? Every human being has a differentiated, unique perspective. And when we give it to another without an agenda, that is outer authority. The body, which is the life, has a brain pan that has an experiential process that develops the holding of space for the personality to be a witness of the consciousness being, it seems to be, embodied in form. So that means then all of our brains are deeply limited to the specifics of whatever form differentiation we have. I have feeling. What do you have? Smell, taste, seeing, touch. What is it? As in the personality, we who are personality, we seem to struggle with being locked into whatever our differentiated limitation is. We struggle with it in life. You're too sensitive. I remember being told that. Why are you like that? You know, emotional, feeling, cognition. Why do you scream at every movie? You know, when people get killed or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. We struggle. Personality judges difference because we are shamed by it from others or embarrassed by it because we are so different. But when that brain body system, when the vehicle is gone or dead, we cannot necessarily have the opportunity for imagining necessarily the context of how one might go through this passage. All we have are these line qualities to read. And here we see loose lips sink ships. If you've ever known somebody with that, you know what that's like. Now, to potentially get a glimpse of her passage, we can think of the way, and remember, it's detriment because she had a Mars there. Remember, she had Mars there? So she's going to fix into the detriment. So here's somebody, according to Ra, that truly did not know in life, but she wanted to, desperately needed to, as in, not for herself, not truly for herself. Remember, she's a projector. It's about supporting the other. She's a basic split, so she's collaborative. So when you break through to the other side and you eliminate the limitation of body, it can be obvious. Ra says that this is a wonderful passage for her. as in leaving behind fully all of the pain that the personality carried in this life, being an alienated leader, the freak that couldn't find her tribe, the freak that had to struggle and fight alone. The personality had to suffer within the constraints of not knowing why, potentially. There's no why in here. There's only pain and suffering. And so all of a sudden, death, and then there was no one to tell and no time and nowhere to go, no form, no concept of tribe or this or that, just a passage and the light or the essence and potentially those people, beings, guiding. Yeah? Remember, fourth line is about others. So in this passage through, according to Ra, you always leave something behind. That's why it's a passage, a melting away or a drifting away, according to going through a fourth line process. So these are those beings that have passage in their sequence as far as the fourth line in the passage. These are those beings whose personalities have truly suffered, and they can shed that suffering. Not all of them shed it through this personal process. For her, she had Mars, loose lip sync ships, the secret. It can be something else. It doesn't have to be this particular line quality, right? We know that it will be other gates, that there's a resonance, that everyone has a story, yeah, to tell. For everyone, there's this aspect of the sequence that's there for them, whatever it happens to be. Remember, it's going to be very specific. So we honor the form. And in the end, death brings the reward that can only come from beyond the form in death. And that is, for this being in the middle, passage. Then she entered into the line 5, reunion. The fifth line, receiving, or putting out the call, I should say, putting out the call, because we have here intelligent application. Enter into reunion and the end of the sequence. The reunion labeled the call. Okay, so the trial, the opportunity, the call. It's always a being, according to Ra. The reunion is always going to be with a being. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with time or place, because remember, we're out of time. There is no place, because we're in Bardo now. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with whether the being is going to be human or not. It is a reunion in the line 5, the 5th stage. So this reunion, in and of itself, it's not like what we think of as in our human form meeting an other, according to Ra. You and I, we meet each other in the flesh, or, maybe remotely on Zoom and the like. But we, in this body, don't really know what it's like for spirit to meet spirit, because we're still embodied, we're still in flesh. So the way that we interpret spirit is interpreted through our limitation of being currently attached to this body, this being in form. But we never truly get to meet the crystal. This is meeting, a meeting. So what Ra guessed from this meeting is that in the reunion, he imagined she did not stay very long in that state. As in, he would assume that she was given what she could never have in life, which was she could finally go home, that reunion. Remember, what is the lament of any undefined G center, higher self, or even unconsciously defined G operating out of integrity? The lament is looking for home. I remember growing up with that pain and suffering. I just want to go home. I just want to go home. I didn't ask to be born. Why am I here, in dealing with the suffering? And yet, when we get to the line 5 of reunion, we are home. We get to be home. And that ride home out into being just those floating crystals of consciousness. So Ra says that ignorance for an intelligent being is a terrible thing. I was going to say unintelligible. Maybe sometimes. Ignorance for the intelligent is a terrible thing, as in it's terribly punishing. Okay, so a life that was incredibly painful. In the first 3 years almost of my practice, I focused specifically and only on projectors and just did projector LYD after projector LYD. And some of the most bitter people I have ever met were in my classes. Incredibly pained, suffering. But what a beautiful way that this particular being went out the door, as in what was written on her doorway, this alienated leader, as in what was required of her in this life to be. Remember, every single one of us has value, whether we live that in honesty and authenticity or not. We are all witness to the grand play of Maya. If there were no devils, how could we contrast that with saints, heroes, or villains, and so forth and so on? Everyone plays their role in magic and mysticism. And in truth, Bardo is a really beautiful thing. So Ross says that this is not a certificate program where you really get to be trained how to analyze this necessarily. If you really want to do the fullness of analysis work, you would have to be an analyst. So for all of you who are not in analyst training program, my apologies that this doesn't explain everything that I just went through. It would have taken too long. You can see we're already well over our normal 90-minute finishing time. But Ra wants us to see, as in there's no way for us to really know these things. That's why we emphasize that he imagined or I projected or we thought or we think or whatever the case may be as far as describing how this works to you and for you. But that if you are an analyst and you are going to do this work, that you have to free yourself from trying to do things good, bad, right, wrong. Do it your way. Trust your instincts as far as how you're going to look at these themes and deconstruct or see them, as in how you might analyze if you're going to do this work for an other. And then again, ideally, you know somewhat of the being so that you can truly get a sense or a feel for what they're going through in death, the thing that they need to see to break free from the suffering, potentially, if they've really had a life full of suffering, to break free from that in order to liberate the passenger, in order that the passenger can finally see. And that's truly what the work is of human design. Liberate the passenger in order to see. He thought that ultimately this is the way it can be so valuable and so rewarding for those of us that remain behind, we who are still here, to see the story of the loved one and to have a sense of their beautiful journey and why they were here and what they were here for in this life, as far as the meaning and purpose, the joy, the beauty, the magic, the wonderment, the awe. Even pain can be beautiful. Bardo is a very beautiful journey, an incredible process if it's right for you to do this work. And for those of you who are in analyst training, I would honor and respect anything of value that you see that you would like to share when we go through all of the potential for you to do this work for yourself or for your loved ones, your family and friends, or even if it ever potentially comes to be that you do this as a profession. I did one analysis recently where the being was very interested in this work, incredibly so. And yet, because I did not have anyone in my community who actually did this professionally, he hesitated to come into the program because fourth line in the environment, as far as the community line quality, was very much looking for his tribe and wanting to know people who actually do this work. So if there's anyone out there that you know of that is doing this work, I would love to hear from them or know of them and about them if it's correct for us to connect ever. Remember that death is not an equalizer. It's a continuation of our individuation process, because we then get to have, through that dying stage, all 5 stages, moving through into that death wheel, that doorway, where in death there is actually nothing, no time, but that death in and of itself gives value to the purpose and meaning of our lives, because death opens the doorway to Bardo. And with those guardians opening, holding open that doorway, we get to see truly, finally, and completely what breaks us through this illusion, this Maya, this sense of separation of self from other. Remember that all of us are connected. Even though we all have magnetic monopoles, drawing me to me, you to you, we all have a connective field that is part of one thing, that we are in communion with each other in life, and so too are we in death. Through these death keynotes, each of us having our unique sequence, however it is correct for us to be picked up again and have our reunion through and after that doorway of the 72 hours, we can come to rest in this space of trust in our aura, and finally, completely, utterly, uniquely loving ourselves. I feel complete.